Greetings, everybody. This is an essay dealing with Reconstruction from 1863 to 1877. So this is the time period following the Civil War. We've got 600,000 casualties, 400 million people newly freed. The South is in shambles. So it's a very important part of our history, and it's still quite relevant to our times, since the repercussions of this still haven't really been dealt with fully. But the overarching essay question for this lecture, and again, essay question meaning you'll write a 5 to 8 paragraph essay, not a 5 to 8 page. Okay, and basically I'm giving you the outline and the contents of the essay within the lecture. So as long as you take notes, you're going to be fine with this. So the overarching essay question is discuss the key questions dealing with Reconstruction. That's basically Concept One. And then the 3 phases of Reconstruction: presidential, congressional, and redemption. And then finally look at the element of how white supremacy was instituted post-Reconstruction, negating the promises of Reconstruction. So, Concept 1 discussed the key questions regarding Reconstruction. 1, did the South ever leave the Union? 2, how do we rebuild the South after its destruction during the war? And 3, how do we integrate and protect newly emancipated black freedom? And 4, what branch of government should control the process of Reconstruction? So I just wanted to, for Concept 1, I just really wanted to put these 4 questions out there. And these 4 questions are really going to frame the rest of this lecture and the essay question. So we're going to be looking at, for question 1 and question 4, question 1 being, did the South ever leave the Union? We're going to be taking a look at that during presidential Reconstruction, because President Lincoln will argue the South never left the Union. It was illegal for the South to leave the Union in the first place. Therefore, they were not ever considered out of the Union. Now, this question will also be addressed in congressional Reconstruction as well, because radical Republicans are going to argue, yes, the South left the Union and they were conquered, and so we need to treat them as conquered territories before we integrate them back into the Union to ensure nothing like that ever happens again. Number 4, again, we'll be really looking at in detail in presidential Reconstruction and congressional Reconstruction. What branch of government should control the process of Reconstruction? The other questions: how do we rebuild the South after the destruction of the war? That's basically the whole process of Reconstruction, both on a social and on a physical level. And number 3 is, how do we integrate and protect newly freed, emancipated black freedom? And that's something that we'll be addressing in all 3 phases of Reconstruction and post-Reconstruction, as that promise begins to fade away. The promise of trying to protect newly emancipated black freedom. So, just to give you an overview of question 1. Question 1 is, again, this is what the President is going to argue, President Lincoln, and then President Johnson, his Vice President, who assumes power after his assassination. They're going to argue the South never left the Union. And the Supreme Court in 1869 would affirm that as well in Texas versus White. The Constitution and all its provisions, this is a quote from Supreme Court Justice Justice Chase, speaking for the majority, stated, "The Constitution and all its provisions looks to an indestructible union composed of indestructible states, considered therefore as transactions under the Constitution, the ordinance of secession, and all the acts of her legislative intended to give effect to that ordinance were absolutely null. They were utterly without operation in law. The obligations of the state as a member of the Union remained perfect and unimpaired. It certainly follows that the state did not cease to be a state, nor her citizens to be citizens of the Union. If this was otherwise, the states must have become foreign, and its citizens foreigners. The war must have ceased to be a war for the suppression of rebellion, and must have become a war for conquest and subjection. Our conclusion, therefore, is that Texas continued to be a state and the state of the Union. Right? So the Supreme Court is basically backing up what the former president at that time would have been at Lincoln, and what Johnson was trying to do with Reconstruction. The second question, again, what branch of government should control the process of Reconstruction? We're going to look at that. Because the congressional leaders, radical Republicans, are going to really argue that no, the South never left, or the South did leave the Union. They were conquered, and we got to make sure that the newly freed people, slaves, now that they have their freedom, are integrated functionally into society, and their rights are protected. And we got to make sure that the people that are responsible for the Civil War, Southern Confederate leaders, are held accountable and are unable to ever assume power again. So we'll be taking a look at that in more detail. But all of that, basically what I've just discussed about presidential Reconstruction and congressional Reconstruction, dealing with did the South ever leave the Union, and again, what branch of government should the process of Reconstruction, more in detail in the next concepts. All right, so next concept we'll be looking at presidential Reconstruction. I'll talk to you guys a little bit later.